Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on the Daily Debate, and I'm once again joined in with Yomna Salama, Egyptologist and tour guide. Yomna, it's Sham Nassim Day. Tell us about how you spent your day today, and also from there maybe we can talk more about why is this day special for Egyptians every year.
Well, at the beginning, I spent that day very different from what we used to do, of course, due to the pandemic and all what we have, but still practicing some of the habits that are related to Sham Nassim, like coloring the eggs, which is actually one of my favorite activities. So
you've colored the eggs today?
I've colored some eggs today, and I hang them at home.
Interesting.
And,
so what do you boil them first? I mean, just out of curiosity.
Yes.
You boil them and then you color them?
Yes.
And then do you eat them eventually, or they're just there for
Yes, or you can just try to get the liquid out of the, like make a small hole at the one end of the egg and try to get the liquid out of it.
That sounds better because then it's going to stink, I believe. Yeah.
I am more into this second type because I like to keep the eggs I color them. So I don't like color and then eat them. So I like to
or
keep
leave
the
them
ones
and they stink.
No. So I color the ones actually that already gonna keep them for next year. So actually I have a very big tree of colored eggs from previous years.
So we know that this is a very old thing that the pharaohs used to do, I believe. It was forever the coloring of the eggs. And then there's the salty, some call them rotten fishes. And it's something that really amuses the world, because usually when you eat seafood in particular, it's a very bad food poisoning thing that could happen to you if they're not done properly. But here in Egypt, ironically, they would rot these salty fishes and eat them on this special day.
Yes.
And I know there's two different types of fishes, or maybe there's many, but two different famous types. And one of them is really stinky, Yomna. You have no idea. I have no idea how people manage to. And then there's the green onions as well.
Herring
and the bread, and it's like a mixture. And then I don't know why the egg falls in the middle, because it's forever known that if you want to really kill yourself and get hospitalized, then you would mix egg with seafood. So what is this about?
Well, let's start by shedding light on something very important, and this is important for us all Egyptians, that the Egyptians during the ancient Egyptian time and the time known as the Pharaoh's time were actually people who loved life. They loved this life that they lived, and they were looking forward to the life forever, the life in eternity, and actually they were fun people. And they were very, 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 some people would think when they come to Egypt, everything is related to death, like the tombs, the temples, the pyramids, and they say maybe the Egyptians were pessimistic people. This is totally a huge misunderstanding. Actually, the Egyptians were very optimistic and they enjoyed life, and that's why we ended up having a calendar of something about more than 100 feasts a year. And one of them is the celebrating of the beginning of the spring season. And the ancient Egyptians actually divided the year into 3 seasons. We have the flooding season, and then we have the planting and the planting of the fields and planting the seeds and so on. And then we have the harvesting season. So Sham Nassim was the beginning of Shemu. It means spring. And the beginning of this season, which actually it gives you the life, flowers, gardens, the weather becomes nice, and all this is related to enjoying the life as the Egyptians did. And that was very important for them to celebrate the coming of the spring. And indeed they went out to the fields and to the gardens along the banks of the River Nile to see the sunrise. The sun, which is the source of life, and the River Nile, source of life. And these two are related, because when we talk about the eggs and the salted fish you mentioned earlier,
which is very contradicting to loving life at the end of the day, because it literally kills
but it worked, but it worked.
Kills you.
But it didn't kill us. We survived, and we are still actually...
that in itself needs an experiment.
Exactly.
A scientific study to work on.
You are talking about a feast that's still being celebrated most likely the same way like it has been celebrated 5,000 years ago, with slight changes. and putting in our consideration that Christianity came to Egypt, Islam came to Egypt, religion and language changed, but still the roots.
And foreign countries also.
And foreign countries,
and
foreign countries occupied Egypt.
Yeah.
But the roots, I always say that the roots of the ancient Egyptians are still in our life, in our daily life. And without noticing, we do things the same way the ancient Egyptians did till today without noticing that. And as you mentioned, onions, eggs, and salted fish. Now, salt is used a lot in ancient Egypt as a material for preservation, to preserve. We use salt in mummification, and salt is also used in preserving food. So to salt the fish, like we saw in some of the scenes earlier, they used to salt the fish, and today we salt the fish. And I think salting the fish actually kills lots of germs and bacteria and things that could really harm the human body later on. Now about the eggs. Mm-hmm. The egg is related to life. And the Egyptians used to also paint the egg, but not painting in the sense of painting like we do today. They used to write their wishes and prayers on the eggs and put them in baskets made out of palm tree reeds on top of the roof of their houses. And they believed that when the sun rises, their wishes will be fulfilled. And by the way, everything in ancient Egypt is related to life. Everything is related to the concept of life. So from the egg, life starts. The chicken and so on, and all the stories we know. Before sunrise, they go and I forgot to say that the onions. You asked me about the onions.
The green onions.
The green onions. They believed, there are some theories saying that they believe that the onions will protect them against evil spirits. So they hanged onions on their doors.
Oh, that was garlic, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
and onions, by the way. The Egyptians used onion and garlic.
Yes, I used to see that when I used to visit Egypt during the holidays when I was younger. I would
in the countryside.
Go around, and even in central Egypt, Cairo, and I would see in the balconies, they would always hang garlic.
Why don't you
and I
keep
never
them in the
understood.
kitchen?
That was something very different from where I came from. So I was like, wow, now I know. So it keeps away bad spirits.
One of the theories is saying that
but it's in the balcony though, it's not inside the house.
Yeah, because they put it inside they put it outside in the ancient Egyptian time, so the evil spirits doesn't come into the house. And by time, maybe this is why we have it now in our balconies, because outside is just to protect yourself before the coming of those evil spirits into your house.
Interesting.
Like people put the eye of protection.
Yes.
Also you put it on doors and so on. So things change.
Again, that's an Egyptian thing, right?
Well,
that's an ancient
there is
Egyptian.
always a connection. I believe there is always a connection between ancient Egypt and the present Egypt and what we are practicing today. And of course, for scientists and Egyptologists, there are many theories. We cannot say anything is 100% accurate, but we can see ourselves what happened back then and what we are doing today.
So it's the start of the spring season, and because the pharaohs were very accurate when it comes to calculating and calculations in generals and so forth. But the thing is that every year it doesn't fall on the same date. It would fall on the same day, of course, Easter Sunday, followed by the spring holiday, beginning of the spring season, which is a Monday at all times, but it's not on a fixed date. So I don't know if you can tell me, but I was always curious, how do they fix this date? And how do they know that the spring this year is starting at this time, but it's not starting at, and it's not, because it used to be March, and then it got pushed to April, now it's pushed to May. I'm wondering if spring is going to be pushed to July in a couple of years' time. You know, speaking of a good weather, it's 40 degrees today, 41 degrees tomorrow, so it's crazy really. So what does this have to do really with the fact that they know when spring starts?
Well, as you mentioned, just right now, they were very advanced in calculating, in astronomy, in all the science that they had, and they calculated exactly the time of the year when the number of the hours of the day is as equal as the number of the hours of the night. And at that time, however, after Christianity came into Egypt, it was very difficult for the Egyptians to eat fish and eggs and all that while they are fasting because of the resurrection feast, the big feast, which was, now we had it and we celebrated. And for that reason, it was pushed to the Monday after the Sunday of the
So that's how they came together.
Yeah, and this is how it was. The Easter was associated with the resurrection feast. Most probably this is what happened, and that's why we have it on the Monday following the Easter Sunday.
Now, let's talk more about the fact that I know that this year and last year, apart from the pandemic, which is of course very unfortunate, usually it's a time where people would also go and sit in gardens and parks and take a walk and enjoy the fresh air. Now it's a bit very difficult with the fact that there is the pandemic.
Yes.
Now, while you correctly said that we as Egyptians really are stuck to the traditions that have been always taking place for 1,000 years, but some habits change throughout the years. Are we witnessing new habits now, the fact that they're not going out to gardens, and how do you see that, or how do you feel about that this year?
Well, this year, from what I personally experienced, that people are tending to try to, if the family is going together, maybe try to gather in open areas, like they sit in the garden of their houses, or they go to open areas, open air areas, so they are not really close to each other and also not in a closed area. So this is a way of trying to adapt to the situation we have right now. And if you walk in the streets of Cairo, also you see lots of precautions and people following the rules, that restaurants have limited numbers that they can go in, and in some places they have the seating also in a different way. So this is a kind of adapting to the situation that we are all living today.
Yes. Now, usually when it's not Ramadan, because mind you, this year and last year it coincided with Ramadan, and
Yes.
People don't really benefit from going to domestic tourism, using domestic tourism or shifting to that. But they would do packages. They would always, here in Egypt, tourism companies would go for packages that specifically target feasts and holidays. This
Yes.
year, again, it's very different. Tell us more about this industry this year.
Well, this year you can see yourself if you search on social media, and
there's very good prices, but unfortunately you can't go if you're fasting. But the very good prices.
You will wait till the feast, and then
it's going to be very triple the price, though. Yeah, notice that.
Well, there are good packages. It depends on the offers from the different travel agencies, but there are some very good packages, and actually there are also packages for the young and the youth. To go on holidays in different destinations in Egypt, in 3 stars category hotels, or even motels or camping areas and so on. And I think this is very important, Yasmin, what you mentioned. The domestic tourism is very important for us. I always say we are over 105 million Egyptians now, God blessing. And if only 50% or even less than 50% of Egyptians doing domestic tourism, then we can really recover from such crises that hits not just Egypt, but other touristic destinations in the world. And this is very important to encourage the touristic tourism, and we have the domestic tourism. And we have noticed that, of course, after the opening of the NEMEC, the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, and the Golden Pharaohs Parade, that lots of Egyptians are visiting this museum, for example. This is domestic. This is a kind of domestic tourism, which is very important for our economy.
Yeah, speaking of economy, and I know it's a bit diverted from the topic, but since we're talking about this gate of domestic tourism, and which includes, of course, visiting museums, as you've correctly said, since the pandemic, and especially when there was a period of time where there was a total lockdown in airports, for instance, how has domestic tourism reacted to that chain versus international tourism versus the entire world actually shutting down? So where did domestic tourism lie? And I'm talking about the past 2 years now, almost 2 years.
Yeah, almost 2 years. I would say, my personal opinion, I saw that the Egyptians are actually trying to help the economy and also trying to self-reward themselves by doing some domestic tourism even during the pandemic. And remember, Egypt was one of the first countries who actually applied the measurements and the precautions and the standards of the International World Health Organization, and we had a visit of also the Secretary General of the World Tourism Organization, and they checked the hotels and the Red Sea and so on. We were one of the early destinations applying such international rules, and that encouraged the domestic tourism very much. And even myself, yes, last year I traveled to Dahab. I went to Alexandria with some precautions, because actually you cannot stop your life. So you have to adapt and be very strict applying the rules. As you saw, we are holding our sanitizers over
As
the
you
time.
see me spraying every 2 seconds, and you notice, see,
I was afraid you're going to spray me.
I have to tell you, I spray constantly every 2 seconds.
Yeah,
and I'm
I
not
saw
even
that.
aware of it.
I saw
I'm
that.
not aware of it, and I just hope it would protect us at the end of the day.
I saw that, Yasmin.
Yes, see, this is
so
that's really
we are
scary.
trying to do what we are expected to do, and with the vaccine now, and with the rules of the PCR before arrival and before departure from Egypt, we have noticed some movement of tourists coming from different destinations into Egypt, even before Ramadan and even right now. And we expect that the number, inshallah, God's willing, it will increase. Because when people start to get the vaccine, then they will be opening up again the traveling and so on.
So let's talk more about, since we're still in this topic, the fact that there's a lot of areas domestically that Egyptians were not very familiar with. You mentioned Dahab, and up until 4 or 5 years maximum back, Egyptians did not even think of going to Dahab. Now it's like totally invaded by Egyptians domestically. So I was just telling him, practically thinking of going to Marsa Alam, which is like all the way over there, hoping that I won't, it's not yet haunted. But that's the thing, that now, unlike the foreign tourism where foreigners would come specifically to certain areas, Egyptians are more aware of their country and all the beautiful places that they could visit at the least expenses. Because when you said 50%, that's quite a big number.
This is what I hope, 50% of our population.
People are not financially able to, because you do understand that if I go to different areas from abroad, I'll pay much more less than if I have to go visit myself as an Egyptian here, and that's another thing we need to talk about. But what I'm trying to tell you is that there are destinations that are within budget range. It doesn't have to be a 5-star hotel or even a 4-star hotel. Tell us more about what can the Ministry of Tourism do to promote, especially the younger generations, as you've correctly said, to encourage them to not just for the economy, but for also them understanding more about their country and to know more about their heritage and civilization.
Well, first of all, the culture of Egyptians. Regarding traveling and tourism need to change slightly, and that will help the budget issue that you were talking about. Egyptians always looking for a vacation, then the majority, of course, then you need a hotel and you need so and so and so and so, and of course here comes the non-affordable offers, as you said. But when you change the culture that you can go camping, when I say camping, there are many camping areas in southern Sinai, for example, where I don't know if you would do that, Yasmin, yourself or not.
I have done that before.
You were overnight in a tent.
Yes,
or
I've
a
done
bungalow,
that before.
And your bathroom is outside.
It gets scary at night. Oh, I've done that before. That was such an experience. And then there's no electricity and it gets very scary. And then you have to sleep at 7 p.m., which is also very odd.
But that's eco-friendly.
Yes,
that's
I've done that. That's very unfriendly human sort of thing. No. But some people, they have that anyway.
This is the point. If you change the culture.
I'm a bit more luxurious, so to me that was a huge
you pay more.
Step.
You're the
I pay more.
Yeah,
I wanted to do the adventure, as they said, and then it just didn't work with me. You know, I don't want to use a bathroom where it's at the end of the desert, and I have to like scream out so that they can, you know, open the hole of water. Now that was something really.
No, there are some decent.
Really scary.
Well, I've tried a couple of them actually myself and tourists. There are some decent ones actually.
Yeah, the one in Ras Shaitan were very
good, decent ones, without mentioning the names. In Taba, in Dahab, in Nuweiba, even in Sharm el-Sheikh, there are very decent ones with good facilities, and that's why we are targeting the young and the youth. The Ministry of Sports and Youth also giving some packages for the youth in cooperation with the hotels and Ministry of Tourism. We are encouraging that the style of traveling in the Egyptian mentality actually would change. That will help, especially the youth. Like you've seen what we call backpackers. Backpackers from Europe coming, they got the backpack.
I met a girl who came all the way from Brazil, which was so strange.
Yes,
and I was
budget.
like, that was her 10th stop.
Yes,
yeah.
That's the budget tourism, and they enjoy. And by the way, they get to see things that even the luxurious tourism guest doesn't see.
That's true.
So there is always different aspects at looking at things. Those budget tourism or backpackers, we have some Egyptians who started to do that. When you mentioned Dahab became very popular, and the young people are actually very comfortable sleeping outdoors, sharing bathrooms in the entire camp, cooking their food on their own. Some camping areas, they make you cook your food on your own. You buy grocery and you cook it yourself. So this is changing the style, and that will help. And still, we have the luxurious, we have the average, and we have the budget ones.
Now, let's go back again to ancient Egyptians, and I will talk about the specific types of flowers that they used to plant in celebration of this special day. And the lotus flower was...
I'm wearing one ring, lotus flower.
Lotus flower, they were my favorite even before I knew that they were related to ancient Egyptians. And tell us more about the symbolism of lotus.
Well, one of the most popular plants and flowers in ancient Egypt, of course, is lotus and papyrus. Starting with lotus, which was the symbol of the south, the symbol of southern Egypt. And the papyrus was the symbol of the north, the lower Egypt. We always say lower Egypt in the north and upper Egypt in the south.
Seriously?
Yes, because the river Nile runs from south to north. So upper Egypt or the south is higher than the north. So in the south, lotus was the symbol, and in the north, papyrus was the symbol. And you always see the two plants in many of the scenes tied together. The lotus and the papyrus tied together with a knot, saying, and the significance here, that upper and lower Egypt will never be apart again, and they will never be divided. This is when Narmer or Mina, the first pharaoh, unified upper and lower Egypt. Lotus is also used in many scenes as symbol of love and affection. We find husbands on many scenes giving the wife lotus flower, because also from lotus they
really?
made...
Which era did that come?
King Tut, for example.
Yeah. Back then, yeah. Back then was the time.
Today there's some of
was
that.
the time. Yeah. Right.
So they give lotus flower as symbol of love and affection, and also of decoration, used in decorating the baskets, and you find the lotus flower also, they made out of it ointment and oil and perfume. So that's the significance of lotus. Mentioning papyrus, which is also very important, because papyrus, on the other hand, was used in the daily life. Papyrus, symbol of lower Egypt to the north, but also from papyrus they made baskets, they made sandals, they made mattresses, they made nets for catching fishes. So it was a plant that was used in the daily life, apart from its importance. And in Saqqara, for example, you see scenes people are holding papyrus and lotus flowers together. And again, you always see them in many scenes together.
Do they get to be planted at the beginning of spring? Is that why it's associated with the spring?
No,
or
papyrus was planted all
the
over
lotus.
the lotus blossoms at the spring. But we had lotus also almost all year long in ancient Egypt. And it looks very beautiful.
It is a beautiful flower.
Yes.
Let's talk more about branding Egypt today. I mean, you've mentioned a couple of moments ago the parade of the queens and the kings, which is breathtaking. I mean, we can go on forever speaking about that. I mean, just talk about everything that took place over that night, and the very much hard work and the hundreds of people who contributed in making it look very prestigious and honorable in front of the entire world.
Yes.
But from here, this itself, the event was not just, it could have been covered at a very low profile, simple way of just transporting these mummies to another destination. The fact that they did it in this way is the way that they had, I mean, this is promoting Egypt on its own.
Egypt,
and
as you
branding
said.
Egypt, as you said. So tell us more about the diversification and the different mentality and pumping new blood in this industry that had made those, I'm sure young people came up with this idea, and where do you see this taking Egypt in its form of branding it today to the rest of the world, basically?
Where I see this taking Egypt, so setting very high expectations now from the Egyptians and from tourism in Egypt. After the great success of this parade, that we can speak forever about it. As you said, everything was actually so perfect. I have never seen such an event like that, really. I was proud.
We too, as media people, we usually have a different eye when we look at events because we're more technical, so we would be very focused on the lighting, the camera movements. It was breathtaking, so I can tell you, if technically this was breathtaking, I'm sure that ordinary people would also, the citizens would be finding it so.
Yes, and the connection. And the connection, when you see, again, the Egyptians are singing in the ancient Egyptian language.
But in an opera format, which is blending as well.
Yeah, which actually touched my heart very much, and I think many people have been putting posts on their social media and Instagram and Facebook and so on, talking in particular about this, that we are connected to the ancient Egyptians, and this is very important for the branding, you said. You find the roots, and you find the connection, and you start using that for the brand. We don't need to make up something different or to invent something different,
or to make something ordinary that's very similar to the rest of the world.
Yeah, we don't need to do that, because we have such a rich history and culture and civilization, and all we need is to connect.
Making use of such things, like the movement, as I said, the inauguration of GEM, they said that there's another one that's also going to be taking place, I think, Tut.
Yes,
and his parade in transforming everything and his belongings to GEM. That would also be an international event. So we're seeing that this is the new diversion now, is that anything that will be done in terms of discovery or transportation or movement, they would do it in this way.
Hopefully, hopefully. And of course, we are all anticipating and waiting for the opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum, the GEM. Which is going to be Egypt gem to the world. And as you said, King Tut, this young pharaoh that people have been speaking about for ages now, and I always say the lucky boy.
Yes, he is a lucky boy, 9 years old, very lucky boy. I mean, the world is talking about him for thousands of years, but he must have been very influential. We'll talk more about this, but if you allow us to go to the short break, we'll be back right after this. Stay tuned.